I always thought my job was simple. Stand, observe, and don't let anyone pass the castle. Gates were high enough to make any man feel small, thick stone. Reinforced wood, heavy iron, nothing there was made to fail. And neither do I. At least that's what they repeated from day one. Don't you think? You don't question, you just decide quickly and close it before it's too late. I learned to do it well. Better than most. I saw people before they even got close enough to speak. By the way you walk by, the look for the silence. There's always something that delivers. And most nights, nothing happened, just the wind beating against the walls. The distant sound of guards changing shifts, the light creaking of the wood when the cold pressed, and it was in this silence that the mind began to speak louder, and it was like that night. Everything was too quiet. Not the normal silence, but a silence that seemed to watch back. I felt it before I saw it, something wrong, something out of place. My hand gripped the spear tighter, and my eyes roamed the path ahead. It took a few seconds, but then I saw a figure alone walking slowly towards the gate. No rush without trying to hide. That in itself was wrong. Nobody approaches a castle like that, not at night, not alone. I straightened up the firm stance. The ready voice stopped there, I said. Figure continued walking for a few more steps before stopping. Far enough away that I can't see the face clearly, but close enough to know he wasn't armed. Or at least not visibly. Who are you? I asked. The response took a while, but when it came, it was low. Tired, someone who needs to come in. That was no answer. It was a problem. No one enters without a reason, and no one enters without authorization. Come back at dawn, I said, keeping your voice steady, safe. The figure was silent for a few seconds, and then he took another step forward, just one more. But it was enough, please, he said. I don't have until dawn. That sentence stayed in the air, and something inside me reacted. It wasn't fear, no distrust, it was something else. Something I didn't like to feel. While I was at that post out, I took a step forward too. Getting a little closer, trying to see better, the torchlight at the side partially illuminated his face. And what I saw was no threat. Irregular breathing, dirty travel clothes. It looked like someone running away from something worse. And that was exactly the type of situation that caused the most error. Because that's how they get in. This is how stories begin a request. An exception or wrong choice, you can't come in, I said again. But this time, my voice wasn't the same. He realized. I know what you're thinking, he said. And that stopped me for a second, because it wasn't what he said it was. Like he said, to come. To direct, as if you really knew. If I wanted to invade, he continued, I wouldn't come alone. I wouldn't come asking. I felt my body become more alert, because that made sense. But it could also be exactly what someone would say. To appear trustworthy. My gaze dropped for a moment, watching his hands. Empty, no tremor, no suspicious movement, but still something didn't quite fit. What do you want here? I asked. He took a deep breath and replied, protection. The word came simple, but heavy protection from what I insisted on. He hesitated, and for the first time it seemed to choose the words. From those already inside, the world seemed to stop for a second, because that answer changed everything. Wasn't someone running away from outside, it was someone pointing inside to the castle. For what I was saving, my grip on the spear tightened, and the mind started to work faster. That could be a lie, an attempt to confuse me, but it could also be something worse, something real. And if it were real, so I wasn't just guarding the gate, I was keeping something stuck, and it brought a different feeling. Heavy. You're saying the danger is inside? I said. He didn't respond immediately, just stared at me, and in that look I saw something that didn't fit with someone who was bluffing. Sure, no one enters without order, I said. But this time the phrase seemed more to me than to him, because the decision was no longer as simple as before. He took another step, closer to the light, and now I could see the face better. There were marks. Not of battle, but from someone who had spent too much time trying to survive. If I leave, he said, I die. The sentence was not dramatic. It wasn't exaggerated. It was direct, and that's what hit me the most. Because it didn't feel like a request. It seemed like a realization. And at that moment, something inside me moved. Something that wasn't part of the rules, but it was always there, waiting the wrong time to show up. I looked at the gate. Then for him, and I felt for the first time that night wouldn't be like the others, because it didn't matter what I chose. Something was going to change. And maybe it had already changed before I even realized it had already changed before I even realized. Because at that moment I understood that it wasn't just about whether or not to open the gate. It was about who I believed in. What I was taught, or what I was seeing right in front of me. I held the spear tighter, but I didn't get up. Not yet. The man remained standing still, without trying to move forward, without forcing anything, and that only made everything more difficult. If he was running, if you were screaming, if you were threatening, it would be simple. I would have already closed that decision within myself. But he didn't do any of that. He just waited. And sometimes waiting is the most dangerous thing anyone can do, because it gives space to think, and thinking about that place was never part of my job. I took another step forward. Now the distance between us was smaller. The torchlight illuminated his face better. And the more I looked, it was harder to see an enemy there, but something still didn't fit if the danger is inside. I said. Why do you want to enter? He took a while to respond, and this time I realized it wasn't out of fear, it was choice. Because I need to go out with someone. He said. That made my body freeze for a second. Someone who, but before I even asked, he replied, someone who can't go out alone. The silence that came after was heavy, because that was no longer a simple request. It was something else, something deeper, more complicated. Do you know this castle? I said. He nodded slowly. More than I would like. That didn't help. In fact, it made everything worse because it meant he wasn't there by chance. And it also meant he knew exactly what he was saying. And who is this person? I asked, my voice lower now. More controlled, he stared at me for a few seconds, as if he was measuring how far he could go. Then he responded, someone you protect. The impact came immediately, non-physical but internal. As if that sentence hit a point I didn't expect. I protect the castle, I said, trying to keep logic to structure. But he shook his head lightly. No, you protect people. That difference seemed small, but it wasn't, and I felt it right away because he was right in the end. Everything there was about protecting someone. Even if no one said it out loud, I clenched my teeth, trying to keep control. If you know that much, then say so. I told you who. He took a deep breath, and for the first time, I saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't fear, it was weight, as if the name he was going to say carried more than I was prepared to hear. Your brother. The world seemed to shrink for a moment, as if all the space around had been compressed into that single word. My brother. That doesn't make sense, I said immediately. Too fast, like I was trying to push it away before I even understood. He didn't respond right away. Just kept looking, and that pissed me off more than anything else. My brother is inside the castle, because I insisted. But now my voice wasn't so steady anymore. He doesn't need to leave here, I continued, but as I spoke, something inside me started to move, something I didn't want to face. Are you sure about this? He asked. The question was simple, but it destroyed any sense of control I still had, because I wasn't sure, not really. My brother was there, a short time ago, had been called, selected just like other young people in the village, to serve, to learn to become useful. That's what they said. That's what everyone believed. But now with that man standing in front of me saying that everything seemed incomplete. What do you know? I asked, the lowest voice heavier. He took a step forward, and this time I didn't stop, because I needed to hear. More than I needed to keep my distance. I know what happens to those who enter, he said. And I know what happens to those who stay. Silence fell between us, like a stone. Heavy property, irreversible. You're lying, I said, but it didn't sound like certainty. It sounded like an attempt. He nodded slightly, as if I already expected this. So tell me, he replied. No rush, no pressure. When was the last time you saw your brother leave here? The question remained in the air, and this time I didn't get an immediate response. Because I didn't remember. Not really. The days had blended together. The routines, the shifts, the obligations. And I never stopped to think about it. I had never questioned, because it wasn't my role. But now, that was there, impossible to ignore. I felt tightness in my chest, slow rising, and for the first time that night, fear changed shape. It wasn't about the man anymore, the outside. It was about what could be inside, and that it was much worse. It was about what could be inside, and that was much worse. Because for the first time since I took that post, I felt like I wasn't protecting the castle. I was protecting something I didn't understand. My gaze moved away from him for a moment. Instinctive, like I needed to confirm that everything was still in place. The walls, the torches, the gate, everything looked the same, but it was no longer. Because now I knew there was a doubt there, and doubt changes everything. You were trying to confuse me. I said lower, more controlled, but inside I no longer had the same control. He didn't respond right away, just watched, as if he was waiting for me to arrive alone where he was already. I looked at him again. If that were true, I would continue. Really was something wrong inside. Why didn't anyone say anything? Why didn't anyone leave? He took a deep breath, and the answer came without hesitation, because they can't just like that. No long explanation. No attempt to convince, just that. And that's exactly what hit me, because simplicity sometimes carries more truth than any speech. My body became tense, and I felt a chill go up my spine, not because of the wind, but because of the possibility I thought about my brother. Last time I spoke to him, in the way he looked excited, proud even, but there was also something there, something I ignored because it was easier, because I didn't want to complicate what felt right. What happens to them? I asked. The question came out before I could hold it. And the moment it left, I knew I had gone too far. He took a while to respond, as if choosing not the words. But how far could I go? They don't come out the same, he said. Some don't even go out. The weight of it fell straight down. No room to deviate, no way to smooth it out. And I felt this time for real. A fear, not that immediate fear of attack, but the slow fear that grows inside. That changes the way you see everything. You have no proof, I said. But it was no longer an accusation. It was almost a request. Like I wanted him to say he was wrong, that it was all just a poorly told story, but He didn't do it. I have more than you know, he replied, and that brought a new tension, different, more dangerous, because it meant that it wasn't just theory, it was experience. What do you want from me? I asked. Direct now. Without trying to surround, he took another step, and this time he was close enough for the light to reveal every detail of his face. Fatigue, Brands, but also something firm determination. I want to come in, he said, and I want to go out with your brother. The way he spoke left no room for doubt. That wasn't improvised. It wasn't a last-minute idea. It was a goal. Do you think I'm going to open the gate because of that? I replied, trying to regain some authority, some control. He didn't shake. No, he said, I think you're already thinking about it. And that hit me more than anything else he had said so far. Because he was right. I was already, even without admitting, even fighting against. The idea had already come in. And once you enter, it doesn't come easy. I looked at the gate again. Heavy property insurance. The way it always was, but now it felt more like a barrier than protection. If I do this, I spoke slowly, without taking your eyes off the reinforced wood. I'm breaking everything I was taught. He didn't respond right away, and when he responded, it was with a calm that almost bothered. Maybe you're doing exactly what you should have done from the beginning. That kept echoing in my mind, mixing with everything I already knew, and everything I was starting to realize, because deep down, the truth was simple. I never questioned, I never looked beyond, never asked enough. And now I was being forced to do this all at once. My heart beat faster. But it wasn't just nervousness, it was a decision brewing. Even though I still didn't want to accept it. If this is a trap, I said, finally facing him again, we both die. He nodded without hesitation, yes. But if it's not, he continued, your brother may already be dead. The impact was immediate, brutal. No room for defense. And it was there at that exact moment that I felt something break inside of me. Not completely, but enough to change the weight of choice. I took a deep breath, slow, trying to organize the chaos that had formed, and for the first time since the beginning of that night, my hands stopped gripping the spear and slid slowly towards the gate lock, not as an impulse, but as a consequence of everything I had heard of, everything I was beginning to understand. And the moment my fingers touched the cold iron, I knew that there was no comeback, not the way things were before, because the moment my fingers touched the cold iron of the lock, I stopped being just the gate guard one. Became part of whatever was going on inside. The metal was cold, heavy family. I had already opened that gate countless times, but never like that, never with that weight on your chest, never with the feeling that every movement carried a consequence that I couldn't control. Later, I took a deep breath, and for a second, I closed my eyes, not to run away, but to listen, hearing if there was something inside me, trying to stop me, something that was still bound by the rules, to order to obedience. But what I heard was something else, my brother's voice laughing, talking about how it was all an opportunity. How would he come back different, better, and now the only thing I could think of. That's what that man had said. They don't come out the same, some don't even go out. I opened my eyes and the lock, the sound of iron moving, echoed louder than it should have, as if the castle itself had noticed, as if reacting. The man behind me said nothing, but I felt his presence, attentive, ready. The gate did not open fully, just enough, a controlled crack, enough for one person to pass, nothing more. I wasn't giving it all away still. He approached, no rush, and when he passed me, I felt something strange. It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't relief either. It was as if the air had changed, heavier, denser. I closed the gate right away, and the lock clicked back into place. Definitive. Now he was in, and there was no longer a separation between outside and inside. There was only decision. You know where to go, I said, keeping your voice low. He nodded. I know better than I would like. That didn't help calm anything down. In fact, it only increased the feeling that I had just done something irreversible. I looked around. The courtyard was empty, how it should have been at that time. But now, every shadow looked different. Every dark corner seemed to hide something. We don't have much time, he said, and started walking without waiting for me to respond. Without asking if I would come along, as if you already knew. And I went, because at that point staying behind was no longer an option. My steps were a silent train, but even so, I felt like every movement was too loud to wrong. The castle at night always had a kind of calm, but that wasn't calm. It was something else. It was as if everything was still. Waiting. Where are you taking me? I asked. He didn't look back. Lower wing, he replied. Simple, direct, and that made my stomach tighten, because I knew that place. Everyone knew, but no one talked much about him. It was where the newcomers stayed. Where were they prepared? Where did they learn? At least that's what they said. I had never gone down there. It was not allowed for gate guards, and I never questioned until now the way there seemed longer than I remembered stone corridors. Space torches, the distant sound of something dripping somewhere, and as we went down the air got colder, heavier. Have you been here before? I asked, even though I know the answer. He nodded already, and that was all. No details, no explanation, but the way he said it was enough. We arrived at a thick wooden door, different from the others, more reinforced no appointments, no symbols, nothing, just a presence. I stopped for a second, observing feeling, and something inside me reacted again. That feeling, the same one I had before I saw him outside, something wrong. Here I sat almost in a whisper. He finally looked at me direct. It's here my hand automatically moved to the sword this time. Not by immediate threat, but by instinct, by preparation. I could hear something on the other side. Very low, almost nothing, but enough not to be silent. What's in there, I asked even. Though I already knew that the answer wouldn't bring me comfort. He held the doorknob, but it hasn't opened yet. And when he spoke, it was lower than before, enough for only me to hear the truth. The word was in the air, heavy, dense, as if that simple sound carried everything I still didn't have the courage to face. And at that moment, with your hand on your sword, and the heart beating harder than it should, I realized that, open that gate outside, it was just the beginning. It was what really mattered. It was on the other side of that door. It was on the other side of that door, and for the first time since it all began, I really hesitated. Not that kind of doubt that passes quickly, but a heavy hesitation that stops the body for a moment. As if some part of me still tries to stop me, my hand tightened on the hilt of the sword. As I watched the man before me, he didn't seem nervous. Not in a hurry, but there was something different now, something more tense, as if even he knew that this was the point where there was no turning back. If you're lying, I told you, base controlled, I'll end this right here. He nodded without hesitation. Fair, no challenge, no provocation. That didn't give me comfort. It just made everything more real. He turned the handle slowly, and the sound of the wood giving way echoed through the stone hallway. The door opened wide enough to reveal the darkness on the other side. But it wasn't an empty darkness. It was filled dense, as if there was something there, something that didn't want to be seen. He entered first without looking back, and I followed soon after, because stopping there didn't make sense anymore. The air inside that place was different. Colder, heavier, difficult to breathe. The torches on the walls were weaker. The light flickered, creating shadows that moved irregularly. The space was bigger than I expected. It wasn't a room, it was a runner wide with several doors on each side, all the same, all closed, and all carrying the same strange silence. I took a few steps forward, trying to understand what I was seeing, and then I heard a sound, bass weak but unmistakable. Breathing coming from one of the doors after another and another. As if there were several people there, but none of them dared to do more than exist. My chest tightened. "What is this?" I asked. But my voice was lower than I wanted. He kept walking as if I already knew every step of that place. He said non-stop without looking at me. "They are the ones who are still here." That didn't explain, but I didn't need to explain much either. I approached one of the doors slowly. As if any sudden movement could break something invisible, I put my hand on the wood, and I felt cold, wet, live the wrong way. I pushed lightly, and the door gave way as more than it should, more than was normal. What was inside was not what I expected. Not completely a man, sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, slim, pale. The eyes open but empty. He breathed slowly, shallow, but it didn't react to the light, not even the sound. Not even in my presence. "Hey," I said, taking a step inside, but he didn't move. Not an inch, as if he were there, but it was no longer. My stomach turned and I took a step back, closing the door without realizing. "What did they do with them?" I asked. Now, unable to hide, he finally stopped and turned to me. "Nothing," he said, and that's what hit me more than any explanation. Nothing, because that didn't seem like the result of something done. It looked like the result of something taken, something ripped away. "They come in," he continued, "and little by little they stopped being who they were." My heart accelerated, and my mind tried to find logic. Some explanation, some sense. Why did Asa word came out? Almost broken. He stared at me for a few seconds, and then he replied, "Why, it is useful, just like that, cold, direct, and completely wrong, but at the same time, terribly plausible." I ran my hand over my face, trying to organize everything, trying not to let it take over me completely. And it was then that I heard different from other sounds, different from weak breaths. One beat light, irregular, coming from further ahead. I froze for a second, and I looked in the direction of the sound. He also heard, and this time didn't need to say anything, because we both knew it wasn't like the others. My steps moved before I even decided, slow, cautious, but inevitable. The sound continued clearer now, closest, and as I got closer, something inside me was tightening more and more until I stopped in front of a door, same as the others, but at the same time different, because I knew no need to open what was there. My hand shook slightly, for the first time since it all started, and that was enough to make me realize how much did that matter. I looked at the man next to me, and he just nodded. No rush, no pressure, but with a certainty that I could no longer ignore. I took a deep breath, and I took my hand to the doorknob, feeling the cold of the metal, same as the gate, but much heavier now. And when I started to spin, I already knew that whatever was inside it would change everything once and for all. It would change everything once and for all, because the moment the doorknob turned completely, I felt before even seeing something different in there. It wasn't just the air, not even the temperature was present. I pushed the door slowly, without taking your hand off the sword, prepared for anything, not an attack. It was silence, a silence heavier than all the others. The torchlight came in first, cutting the darkness little by little, revealing the wall, the floor. My brother was there, sitting just like the others, leaning against the wall. The thin body more than I remembered. His clothes were still the same as when he arrived, but they were worn out, dirty, as if time had passed faster for him. Then for the rest of the world, my chest stopped, and for a moment I couldn't move. I couldn't speak nothing. I just looked, trying to find something familiar, something that was still him. I took a step forward slowly, as if any sudden movement could break that moment, or worse, confirm what I was already beginning to fear. I stopped in front of him, just a few steps away, and I bent down slightly. Enough to see the face better. The eyes were open, but they weren't their voids distant, as if they were looking at something that no longer existed. I swallowed dry, and I said, calling his name, bass almost, like he was just for me. Nothing, no reaction, not a blink, not a movement. I felt something tighten inside me. Strong, fast, I reached out, hesitant, and I touched his shoulder, cold, not iced, but cold enough that it doesn't feel right. Hey, I said it again, firmer now, but still, nothing behind me. The man didn't move. I didn't say anything. I shook his shoulder a little stronger, trying to get some reaction. Anything, but the body only gave in slightly to the movement. No resistance, no response, as if it were just a body, their unwilling no presence. Without him, my heart started to beat faster, not out of fear, but out of despair. This can't be true, I said. More for me than anyone else. This can't be him, but it was every detail, every stroke. It was him, and at the same time, it was no longer. What did they do to you? I whispered, the voice breaking, unable to hold it completely. And then something happened. Small, almost imperceptible, but it happened. His eyes moved very little, but enough. I froze and I got closer, racing heart, trying not to miss that slightest signal. Are you listening to me? I asked fast, as if I was afraid of losing it. His eyes lingered, but they adjusted. Not completely, not clearly, but enough to stop me. And in that moment I felt he was still there, too deep, almost lost, but not completely. I'm here, I said firmer, now closest to me. His breathing changed, very little, but it changed, and that was enough to ignite something inside of me, something I thought I had already lost that night, hope. But before I could do anything else, a voice echoed through the hallway, steady, cold, and completely out of place. I knew someone would end up coming down here. My whole body locked up and I turned slowly. The hand already gripping the sword tightly at the end of the hallway, a figure appeared, dressed differently from regular guards. Upright posture, direct look. No surprise, no rush. As if I expected to find exactly that. You took longer than I thought. He continued, the eyes passing from me to the man next. To me, and then back to me. But it did exactly what I needed. Those words weren't confusing. They left no margin. And in that moment, everything fell into place in a way I didn't want, except the man next to me. Didn't react. Didn't move. But he didn't seem surprised either. And that was enough for the weight to fall off, heavy, definitive. I hadn't let the enemy in. I'd been guided to it, and now I was exactly where they wanted me to be, exactly where they wanted me to be. The finding did not come as a surprise. Came like weight slow, fitting in with everything that had happened since the moment I saw that figure approaching the gate. Every word, every silence, every choice, everything had brought me here. My hand tightened on the hilt of the sword, but I didn't move. Forward still, because the mistake had already been made. And attacking without understanding would only make everything worse. The man next to me finally moved lightly, taking a step forward, but not in my defense. Not by my side. He positioned himself a little forward, like it's between me and the figure at the end of the hall, but not to protect, to align. So that's what I said, the low voice, but firm enough not to shake. You needed me to open the gate. He didn't respond, and that confirmed more than any words. The figure in front took a few steps, slow, controlled every step, echoing in the stone hallway. There's no need for resistance, he said. The calm voice trained, almost empty of emotion. You've already done the hard part. I felt something rise in my chest. Don't be afraid. But anger cold targeted my part. I repeated, eyes fixed on him. He nodded slightly. Yes, bring him here. I laughed. No humor at all, a dry sound short, so this was all just a game. I said. The man next to me finally spoke. It wasn't just that. And that answer made me look at him for real, for the first time since where it all started. Because now, I saw it differently. Not like someone asking for help, but as someone who was already part of that. Did you know, I said, and he didn't deny it. Knew enough. That was worse than any lie, because there was no attempt to hide. Only acceptance. Just sure, why did I ask? and this time I really wanted to understand, because there was still something there, something that didn't quite fit if it was all a plan. Why get involved like that? Why not force? Why not attack? Why wait? The figure at the end of the hall responded, because you needed to choose. Just like that, without hesitation, without a doubt, and that answer hit me in a different way, because it made sense. A distorted sense, wrong, but still logical. You wouldn't open the gate under threat, he continued, but I would open it out of doubt, out of fear, for someone you believe you can still save. My gaze automatically returned to my brother, still sitting, still stuck in that state between presence and absence, and I felt the weight of it. They weren't just taking people out, they were using them as a key, as a tool. Like weakness, I took a step forward, slow measured, and this time the sword came out of the sheath. The sound of metal echoed through the hallway, but no one moved, no one reacted in a hurry, because they still believed they had control. Do you want what I now asked? Firm voice, no more hiding. Anything, the figure responded. You direct bluntly. No attempt to smooth, I'm already here, I replied, but he shook his head lightly. No, you're still deciding. And that was what bothered me the most, because he still believed that I was playing their game, that I was still stuck with the choice that brought me there. But there was a difference now. Before I didn't know, before I was reacting, not now. Now I saw. Now I understood, and that changed everything. I looked at the man next to me. Did you bring as many as I asked? He didn't respond immediately. In that silence, that was enough of an answer. Too much, that's what he said finally. Base, almost as if for yourself. My grip on the sword tightened, and for a second, I thought about attacking right there, end it as directly as possible, but something held me back. No doubt, don't be afraid strategy, because killing one of them wouldn't change what was happening there. I wouldn't bring my brother back. Wouldn't stop others from continuing to arrive. I needed more. More than a scam, more than a reaction, you said. They are useful, I said, looking directly. The figure in front, useful, as he watched me for a few seconds, as if deciding how far to speak. And then he replied, they keep what's beneath us. It made the air even heavier. Below there was something below. Something worse than what I've ever seen. And suddenly those people in the rooms, they no longer seemed like just victims. They seemed part of something bigger. Something I still didn't fully understand, and maybe I didn't even want to understand. But now, there was no choice, because I was already in. And everything I believed to protect it was never what I thought it was. It's just the surface of something much deeper and much more wrong, much deeper and much more wrong. The word below got stuck in my mind, echoing, repeating itself as if it had its own weight. I always thought I knew that castle, every corridor, each tower, each pass. But that wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. My breathing got slower, controlled, but inside everything was accelerated. Keep what's below, I repeated, eyes fixed on the figure in front. What exactly is below? He didn't respond right away, and that was enough of an answer to make me more alert. Because who controls the information control everything. And he knew it. You don't need to understand everything he said, finally. You just need to decide which side you're on. I felt a slight movement behind me, almost imperceptible, but enough. My brother, I quickly turned away, and I saw, different from before, very little, but enough. His head had tilted. Eyes still heavy, but trying to focus, trying to stay, and that changed everything again. It wasn't just about finding out anymore, it was about getting him out of there now. Before it was too late, I took a step to the side, positioning myself between them and my brother, without looking away from the figure in front. If I say no, I said, what happens? The answer came quickly, direct. You don't leave here, just like that. No exaggerated threat, no attempt to intimidate. Just fact, and that made everything more dangerous, because it meant they weren't worried. Not even with my reaction, not with my choice they had control, or did they believe they had my gaze quickly. Slid down the hallway, ports, shadows, silence. And then something made sense. Yes, we're not armed as guards. There was no rush. There was no tension. Because that place was already the weapon. It was already in control, you said. Keep something, I continued. Taking another step, slow measured how the figure tilted its head slightly. As if analyzing every word I said, as if I were evaluating how much I had already understood. And then he replied. They feed. The word was simple, but he carried something heavy. Wrong feed, what I insisted. But before he responded, a sound cut the air, bass deep, coming from below. Not from the hallway, not from the rooms, but from somewhere beneath our feet, a sound that didn't seem human. Not an animal, something in between, something old. My body reacted instantly. The muscles, tense breathing stopped for a second, and I saw, for the first time, a change in the expression of the figure in front. Don't be afraid, but be careful, as if that sound wasn't expected at that moment I said that. Quietly, what is this? The man next to me replied in this time no calm, no control, as if that broke even his certainty. That's why you opened the gate. The impact came straight, because now it made sense. It wasn't just about bringing people. It was about keeping something contained. Something that needed more, always more. My brother made a faint sound behind me. Almost a sigh, but different, more present, more real, and that was enough. I didn't think anymore. I didn't analyze. I didn't measure consequences. Moved fast, direct, crouching down beside him, passing his arm across your back. Feeling too light, weight too wrong. He didn't resist, but it didn't help either. Just gave in. As if any direction is the same, we're going to get out of here, I said. Base steady more for me than for him. But at that moment, I needed to believe the figure in front took a step. But I was already standing, with my brother leaning on me and the sword in the other hand. Don't move, he said, but now the voice was no longer so controlled, and that it gave me an advantage, small, but enough, because for the first time, they weren't completely sure. The sound came again, stronger, closest, making the ground vibrate slightly. And that changed the air, changed the balance, changed. Everything you don't understand, he said, but now there was urgency. If you take him out of here, that goes down, that goes up. The words got mixed up, but the meaning was clear enough. They weren't keeping it locked up by choice. They were keeping it out of necessity. And those people, they were. Part of it, I squeezed my brother tighter, feeling his breath weak. But there, I won't leave him here, I said, without raising your voice, without hesitation. And this time I wasn't choosing between rules and doubt. I was choosing between what was right and what I could no longer accept, even without understanding everything, even without knowing what was about to happen. Because some things you just can't keep turning a blind eye, that you don't see. Because the moment I said that there was no more room to retreat, not even to negotiate, not even to pretend, I was still on the same side as them. My arm pressed my brother against me, the sword steady in the other hand, and for the first time that night I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. The figure in front changed posture, subtle but enough the control he carried. Until then it was no longer absolute. You don't understand, he repeated. But now, the voice carried something new. Hurry! If you take him out of here, this won't stop, this will go up. I took a step back, pulling my brother with. Keeping distance if it depends on that, I said. So it's already wrong. He didn't respond immediately. And that silence, it was everything I needed. Why confirm? None of that was balance. It was forced containment, based on sacrifice, based on people who didn't even know what they were supporting. The sound came again. Stronger, closest now. It wasn't just vibration. It was impact, like something pressing from below. Testing, forcing. The torches on the walls flickered more brightly, the shadows distorted, and for a moment, the entire hallway seemed to breathe wrong. Stay where you are, the figure said, but he didn't move forward, and that said more than any order. He couldn't get closer, not without risk. I started to retreat slowly, measuring each step, every move, without taking your eyes off them. The man who brought me there seemed torn, the eyes going from me, for the figure and back, as if I was seeing something I hadn't anticipated. You said you wanted to save. Him, I said, direct, without softening. Now is the time. He opened his mouth, but no words came out right away, and in that second I saw. Not sure, don't control, but doubt, the same doubt that made me open the gate. Only now on the other side, the sound below came once again, this time accompanied by something new. A snap, dry, deep, like a stone giving way, or something breaking. The ground beneath our feet really shook now. Don't take no far, yell immediate. The figure finally advanced a step enough. He said the calm was gone. If you continue, it will condemn everyone here. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied. Have you already done this? The words came out effortlessly. Without a doubt, because at that point, I already understood enough, even without knowing everything. And that was enough. I turned my body a little, preparing the way back. Climb exit, that's all that mattered now. But before I could take another step, a sound came from behind a door opening, then another, and another one. I froze for a moment, and I looked. The doors along the hallway were opening, slowly, one by one, and from within them, the bodies started to move. Not fast, but different, more present, as if something had changed, as if whatever was being held, if you were letting go. The once empty eyes, now they moved to no focus, no direction, but alive in a wrong way. My brother made a low sound, stronger than before, and tried to support even without strength. Even without control, this shouldn't happen, the man next to me said. But now his voice carried something I recognized. Well, fear you lost control, the figure responded, dry, cold. But there was tension there too, and this confirmed that it wasn't part of the plan. I took another step back then, another, keeping my brother with me, as the hallway stopped being static. It stopped being silent, and it became something alive, unstable, dangerous. In a new way, the people at the doors didn't move forward, but they were no longer immobile either. They existed there, for real now, and that made everything unpredictable. The sound below came once again, louder than all the previous ones. And this time, something broke, not just sound, not just vibration, but break. I felt it in my body, in the air, on the floor. As if the limit had been reached, I didn't stop. I didn't look back because at that moment it didn't matter anymore to understand. Just leave, just get him out of there before whatever was trapped decided to go up once and for all. Decided to go up once and for all. And in that moment everything is no longer theory, it is no longer a warning, and it became real. The ground shook harder this time. Without rhythm, no control, as if something is pushing from below non-stop. Without hesitation, the stones in the hallway creaked. Some gave way slightly, and a deep sound serious filled the air. It wasn't a roar, not a scream, it was something worse. Something that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I didn't look back, not completely, but I felt the air change hotter, heavier, as if something had been released and now it takes up space. The space that was previously kept forced, arrested. My arm squeezed my brother tightly, feeling too light in your body. Too weak, but nah. He reacted. Little, but I reacted. His fingers moved against my clothes. Trying to hold on, trying to stay, and that was enough to carry on enough, not to stop. The footsteps echoed quickly. No care, no attempt at silence. There was no point in hiding anymore. The entire castle seemed to wake up, doors slamming in the distance, steps running on levels above, screams, confused, disorganized. Like no one really knew what was going on because nobody knew. They just knew something had gone wrong, and I knew exactly when I opened the gate. When I chose not to ignore, when I decided it couldn't go on, the staircase appeared a head-worn stone steep, taking back to the main level. I started to climb. One step at a time, feeling the weight increase, not just his body, but of all, from the air, from the sound, from the pressure that came from below, as if it were following, as if no longer contained. My brother breathed harder, an irregular sound, but alive, and I spoke to him, even without knowing if he understood. "Hold on just a little more, we are leaving." The words were simple, but they carried everything I needed to keep. In the middle of the climb, a stronger impact made the stairs shake. Stone dropping, falling dust, and for a second I lost my balance, but I didn't stop. Couldn't I climb faster, ignoring tiredness, ignoring the fear that was now no longer something distant. It was present, it was close. When I reached the top, the hallway was different. Guards running, orders being given, but no clear direction, no real control. And when they saw me carrying my brother, something changed in the eyes. Recognition, confusion, and then understanding. They knew, even without understanding everything. They knew it wasn't meant to be seen. "Where are you taking him?" one of them shouted, but I didn't answer. There was no time to explain, not enough words for. I kept walking direct, non-stop. The gate was ahead. The same G-Rant property, but now it seemed distant more than before. As if the path to it had stretched, as if the castle tried to keep me there. Footsteps behind me increased, some trying to reach me. Others just watching, not knowing what to do because the rules no longer applied. And when the rules break, people get stuck. I arrived at the gate, and I put my brother down for a second, carefully leaning him against the wall as my hands went straight to the lock, the same cold iron, but now, without a doubt, without hesitation. I pulled with force. The heavy mechanism gave way slower than I wanted, more resistant, but it opened. The sound echoed loudly, mixed with everything that happened behind me. I pushed the gate opening enough, and I came back to him, rising again, ignoring the weight, ignoring tiredness, just leaving, just going. The night air hit me in the face. Cold, clean, diff. It was the first time I truly breathed. I took a few more steps outside, and then I stopped for a moment, enough to look back. The castle was there, immense, as it always was, but now I saw it differently, not as protection, but like prison, and inside the sound continued stronger, freer, as if it had finally found its way. I didn't stay to see more. There was no reason. There was nothing left there for me. I turned around, and I started walking, carrying what was left of my brother, but not empty, no more cause. While I felt his breath, even weak, even irregular, I knew how different from the others. He was still gone. And this time, I wasn't guarding the gate I was leaving behind. Everything I should have never protected,